Hey, so good afternoon to everyone. A few things that we'd like to do first. A huge welcome. It's not often that we have everyone open and into our chambers, but it's done in a way that I would like to believe, and I'm going to stipulate that until I'm proven differently, that it's in a spirit of collaboration, communication. That's what I would like to believe. So today is not about a censorship. You have every ability to communicate your position, your passion. What I'd like to ask is that you direct that towards the problem and not the persons. So I really need your help with that. This is part of our agreement and our, I believe, spirit and connecting our planning board, our team, the applicants, and the constituents in the community together. The idea, in my mind, is to communicate exactly what you would like in a way that is reflective of both of the areas of opportunity. But keep in mind that our plan is to not censor, but provide guardrails. There's going to be a time limit regarding each subject matter, not who's speaking, not in the manner in which you would like to, but just overall, we have a 2-hour window, and we would like to provide as much opportunity for those that would like to communicate as possible. Please understand that any involvement from our staff is going to be in a way that directs and provides an opportunity for someone else to be able to have their moment. Again, I really would like for this to be in the spirit of cooperation. We will not accept any type of attack to an individual from either party or staff, nor is this the forum to debate that. It is to provide your opinion, your perceptions, your interpretations, and then to ask candidly for questions and clarity. That's what I would like to do. So again, a huge thank you for being here. Keep in mind that this is not the last opportunity to do this. We'll have another one. So let's try to solve and find paths forward today, if possible, with the understanding that we'll also revisit at another occasion. So with that being said, I'd like to, again, extend my thank you to our staff for putting this together, our commissioners and mayor for providing this opportunity in the sense of urgency to know that it is needed, to our planning board members and the chair, thank you for making yourself available today, and for you to come out and show us how important these topics are. I'd like you to feel that we're meeting you in the middle with that and recognizing equally how important these topics are. So thank you. With that being said, I'll turn it over to the chairman, Mr. Batty.
Thank you, Mr. Barroso. I appreciate it very much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for coming. Really appreciate you guys being here. We appreciate the opportunity to create more abilities for the community to have input on these very important subjects. Workforce housing, affordable housing has been something that's been part of the planning department's purview for a very, very long time, if not since the beginning. You know, it's something that I've been involved in since I was able to move back here because I was able to purchase a workforce housing unit when I was 19 years old. If it wasn't for that, I don't know how I'd be back here. So I'm a big proponent of it. I really believe in workforce housing. I want to see that it actually is able to be maintained in a way that is protecting our community as well as protecting the individuals who need it. And I'm really looking forward to hearing some more from the community on their opinions and positions on this. Again, my thanks to the staff, especially Katie and the planning directors. They have done a really, really fantastic job at trying to coordinate this and get as much information out to everyone. And again, like as Mr. Barroso said, thank you to the community and thank all of you for coming. Before we get started, I'd like to turn it over to the other board members if they have any comments to make prior to us hearing from planning department staff. Mr. Browning?
Yes, again, thank you all for taking the time to come out this afternoon. You know, it is an honor to be on this board, and despite the criticisms we take, you know, I've been a lawyer for 40 years, so there's not a thing you can say to me that's gonna, you know, bother me. I haven't been called before at least 10 times. But what I did, just for y'all to keep in mind as you come up, is I went back starting the year 2000. The census at that time in Key West was 25,000. And the average list price for a house in the year 2000 was $425,000. In 2015, our population was 25,000.1. So, essentially the same. And the average price or list price of a house had risen to $930,000. As of February of this year, the average list price of a home in Key West is $1.9 million. And our population is actually 24.3 thousand people. So yeah, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that the housing stock has been, to a large extent, been purchased by second homeowners. And undoubtedly, what I've seen over my history here, and those who have been born and grown up here, is that young people cannot afford, like Mr. Batty, to come back here and take an average or median income job and afford to buy or even pay rents down here. So there's been a lot of criticism that this is some kind of slick development stuff. What we're really looking for are answers. This is certainly not a new problem. And when you come up, obviously we're asking everybody to be civil. But what I would ask you, rather than just criticizing what has been proposed, perhaps, is if you have some kind of solution that you can offer this board to this city, some idea that we haven't thought of that will make housing available to the people who live and work, the average person that lives and works in Key West, I would love to hear it. Having said that, I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Browning. Anyone else from the board have any comments? If not, we'll turn it over to our planning director, Katie Halloran.
Hi, everybody. Katie Halloran. I'll try to be real brief here. We want to, after staff kind of catches you up on where we are in the code amendment process, we'll go ahead and ask the applicant, Bart Smith and AJ Davila, to give a real brief overview of what components of his proposed code amendment are coming to a planning board agenda soon. And then we'll open it up for public comment. We'll ask you to maybe start to line up over here on this podium. Bart can answer questions over here. Planning board members, you can direct questions toward them. I can come up here to answer questions. After we get sort of an initial group of comment going, we'll take some time taking Zoom questions. Ben over here is managing Zoom. It's a webinar format, so as he sees hands raised, he'll in order take people off Zoom to provide public comment. I would ask that probably best to start with what's coming next on a planning board agenda, but we know we did have some substantive code amendment recommendations made by planning board this past month in February. And maybe try to keep your comments 3 to 5 minutes to start, just until everyone gets a first chance to go, and then we can, keep going from there on. Just wanted to thank Commissioner Haskell and Commissioner Kaufman and Commissioner Carey. I don't think I've missed anybody else. Oh, and the mayor, hello, thank you. And Commissioner Donnie Lee, thank you for being here. I'll turn it over to Jordan to let you know quickly what was passed already at Planning Board and the 3 overarching sections coming, and then Bart will chat with you for a little bit. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking time to be here today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jordan Mannix-Lackner with the Planning Department. So last month in February, the first of 4 subsections of this amendment was heard. It addresses sections 122-1466 and 67 of the Code of the Workforce Housing Ordinance. That first section has to do with definitions and income classifications, which then defines maximum rental and sales rates. And then the other section is really the bulk of our workforce housing requirements right now. So currently, there's a 30% requirement for new and redevelopment for residential development. So 30% of all units that are newly built or redeveloped has to be set aside for affordable housing. Redevelopment is defined as something that increases the size of the unit, the number of units, or the need for additional workforce housing. The maximum rental rates also require that rent cannot be more than 25% of the monthly income for your classification. There's also a fee in lieu, so a developer can pay a fee in lieu of building a unit. That fee is $200,000, and it also allows for linkage, so you can build your affordable units at a different site than the main development, and that can occur in Key West or Stock Island. So the changes that were heard at last month's meeting and were recommended for approval by the planning board remove the requirement for redevelopment. So only new BPAS units that are being developed would be subject to the workforce housing requirements. It changes the maximum rental rate from 25 to 30%. It allows for linkage up to Shark Key. It changes the fee in lieu from $200,000 to $400,000, or the current maximum sale price for a 2-bedroom affordable unit that's outlined in our maximum rental and sales rate table. It also redefines 2 income categories, low income and middle income, which is the highest. So low income goes from 60% of Monroe County's area median income to 50%, and middle income goes from 140% of area median income to 160%. And that changes how much those units can be rented for and who's eligible to occupy them. It also modifies the spread of units that are required in a development. So it allows smaller developments, less than 10 units, to rent for a higher rate, and it allows larger units in larger developments to rent for a higher rate. That was not originally a part of the applicant's proposal. Staff developed sort of an alternative option that was meant to address some of the applicant's concerns about how much it costs to build units without fully getting rid of the redevelopment component. So that's where that part came from. Staff would no longer recommend that without, in this context, but that's where that comes from. And that's a high-level overview of what was passed or what was recommended for approval by the planning board last month. The other 3 remaining components are outlined in this document. It creates a commercial inclusionary housing program. So when a commercial development expands its square footage, or when there's new commercial development that didn't exist, there's a affordable housing requirement and a fee in lieu calculation that would allow linkages up to Shark Key or perhaps Big Pine, TBD, I think. The other item is waivers for performance standards and site plan requirements. So for developments that have 40% or more affordable housing units within certain districts that are outlined in here, there would be non-hardship variances that the planning board would be able to approve for setbacks, parking, landscaping, building coverage, et cetera. It also allows for a density bonus and different height requirements, higher height requirements, and it eliminates the art and public places requirement. And then the 4th one has less to do with workforce housing necessarily, but it would allow for the transfer of development rights, AKA transferring a BPAS unit from one site to another that the city doesn't currently allow for. So that's a high level. Hopefully you can find more details here, or the full ordinance is also up at the front. Thanks.
So just to clarify, a lot of what Jordan said is also in the handout that is up at the front, and there's also a version of the applicant's full proposed code amendment, and I'll turn it over to Bart Smith, and he can talk a little bit more about the next sections of code that are coming to the planning board agenda. Are there any questions right now about what we're doing? Okay, go ahead, Bart, and we'll try to keep it short so we can get to that good public comment. Thank you so much.
Bart Smith, I believe on behalf of the applicant. So thank you all for coming here today. We really appreciate the turnout. I appreciate all of the public input. This is our community, and our community survives because of our workforce, because of our housing, and obtaining more affordable housing is probably one of the most important subjects that we have before us. And it's been a subject that's been before us for some time. And I'm hopeful that we can address it in greater swaths. And to do that, we need to continue to develop affordable housing. I got into assisting developers build affordable housing with the Topino family, with the Corey 1 and 2. It was built on raw land that they owned. They had owned it for so long, they had no basis in it. And that took almost 8 years to build. It was 208 units in phase 1 and 2, and then another 57 in a third phase. That project, we had to rewrite the entire comp plan just for that property to be able to build it. Because the codes that have been adopted in the city of Key West and in the county don't anticipate what is necessary to build affordable housing that's truly affordable and that can be built for the workforce. This has happened routinely. I helped the developers with Records K, 280 units. We had to basically rewrite the comp plan for that in order to provide additional density, reduce setbacks, the height necessary to do 3 floors over parking, as well as to allow for mechanical equipment to be on the top of the building. None of that would have been allowed if we did not rewrite the comp plan for that property. Coca Vista, another one in Marathon, we had to have multiple changes to get done. And I'm working right now on a project in Tavernier as well. What they all have in common is because of the constraints of the code as it exists today, it doesn't allow us to really make an impact on affordable housing. I can tell you in the 20 years I've been doing this, redevelopment of existing properties has gained us less than 20 units. The fact of the matter is that we can build large projects. There's available land to do it. And I have many clients that are willing to do it, but they just need the incentives to do so. And so what we saw was an opportunity when what was proposed was the non-residential housing. What we saw was if we can also provide the opportunities, properties such as a stadium mobile home park in its excess 4 acres of land, the property owned by Blackstone. We know that the Housing Authority has multiple properties that they are looking to redevelop. Trumbull School District, which I've had 2 clients put in bids on and believe should be redeveloped as affordable housing. All of these projects can be built, but in order to build something that is within the realm of possibilities, we need to revise the code. And so that's what we propose to do. For sections coming before the Planning Commission, the next one's probably going to be the non-residential. The non-residential section, the county, the city of Key West, they mirrored the county's version of it, which we felt was wholly acceptable except for one part. From the developer's standpoint, we did not feel that if you substantially improve your property, i.e. you improve it over 50%, you should be then penalized by being required to provide affordable housing. There's no causal nexus between somebody that improves their office building over 50%, adding to the impact of employees. That building's already existed. The impact's already there. So the only part that we disagree with staff on, and we don't believe there's any rational basis in the code or in the data, is that redevelopment should not be a penalty. You should be encouraged to improve your property. You should be encouraged to update your property. And what the redevelopment section of the non-residential inclusionary housing does is it discourages you, because if you go over 50%, you're obligated to provide affordable housing for no matter what it is. And so we feel that section should be eliminated, but everything else that is from the county's code, and it was the city proposed to adopt, we're comfortable with from the applicant side. The other two sections are 122, 14774, which we call the Live Local enabling. Live Local was adopted in 2023 by the state legislature, and then they made amendments in 2024. There's even amendments being proposed this year, which you can see every year they're having to amend it to clarify it. What we wanted to do was to identify the clarity that's needed from the private sector, from the developer side, to enable Live Local to be utilized, such as the language we have for height, which I know a lot of people says is the concern. Live Local provides that a development can be with more than 40% affordable housing, may be the highest height within 1 mile or 3 stories, whichever is greater. Well, how do you define a story? You know, a story is, our code, is it 8 feet, 9 feet? I brought handouts. Rutgers K is 3 stories, but it's considered a garden-style apartment complex because it's 3 stories over parking, but it's 49 feet. So if 40 feet is the highest height allowed in the city of Key West without mechanical equipment, how do you build a Rutgers K that's 3 stories without clarification about how that elevator shaft and these things go? So that's what we're looking to do, is to define 3 stories and what can entail 3 stories. The setbacks, we're looking for waivers. And I have to state, we've recognized the concerns of single-family districts. There are no waivers or allowances that aren't in the code already for any part of a property that's proposed that is adjacent to a single-family district, a platted lot, or anything that would be a single-family home. And finally, the last part is the transfer of building permit allocations. There are a significant number of building permit allocations, which is the right to build, that when a lot of people have redeveloped homes that had like apartments, they remove the apartment, now it's a single-family home. Those units sit unused, and we're looking for a mechanism to be able to transfer those to other properties so they can be used, taking pressure off the B-Pass, and potentially, and this was actually brought up by a commissioner, you know, providing some type of funding for affordable housing or for the first-time home buyer. So the impetus for that is that these units, and we're at the end of the B-Pass cycle, are sitting unused, and there is a potential to utilize them, and when they're used, could provide for benefit to the city. I know that none of this is perfect. That's why we have workshops. That's why we've already had 4 planning commission meetings. That's why we rewrite these things 100 times. And so I appreciate all of you coming today. I appreciate your feedback, and I hope that I can get your support. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Bart. We're going to start taking comments. This microphone is for you. So if you want to, maybe 3 people start lining up, and we'll go ahead right there. And this is being recorded, and the recording will be on the city's YouTube channel. Is that correct, Jason? Yes.
Thank you. My name is Leo Waters. I live at 1616 Atlantic Boulevard, number 5. It's Casa Casellas. I moved here about 12 years ago from Nashville, Tennessee, where I was on the city council for many years and was participant in the planning commission there quite often. So I have a little expertise. And what I'd like to say is, one, I appreciate Mr. Smith for representing his interests. He does that extremely well, by the way. But his interests are not the citizens of Key West's interests. His interests are either local. He also, I'm sure, has some clients from New York, Chicago, Miami, other places. Our focus and our point here is Key West and its uniqueness. And that is why we're here today. You know, this is a classic bait and switch. You've got some good things in here, and you've got some other things that are not. All of those variances. Impervious surface variance. I live on Atlantic Boulevard. Most of you remember what we had the week before last, the rain. 1.5 feet of water on Atlantic Boulevard. Water all over the island. And now we're looking to pull back the impervious surface so we'll have more water. Maybe it'll be 3 feet next time if this thing passes. You know, by the way, I I apologize for not wearing a suit. No, that's the White House, not Key West. We're different. You can wear sandals and a suit. You know, we are a community here. We're neighbors. I love it. And that's why I'm here. We need to do some serious consideration and changes of this document. All of these variances are going to be called for overdevelopment. I own 3 or 4 units at Thomas Street. I've got 4 people who are workforce people. I'm trying to hold down the rents, but with taxes, with insurance, with the other costs, it's hard. But all 4 are workforce people. So I know a little bit about what I'm saying, and I think we need to totally review this again and take away all of those damn variances that we have here. Thank you very much.
My name is Jeff Siegel, and I'm with the group Protect Our Residential Neighborhoods that hopefully you've gotten some of our messages. Hopefully some of you are here because of that. I wasn't going to say one thing, but I want to start. Mr. Browning asked the right question. What suggestions do we have for workforce housing? It's a problem. We recognize that. Well, you know, there's this project going on with Sigsbee right now, and I don't want to take out time to talk about it, but it really has the ability, and Mr. Lee is here. He was the one that put some requirements in to write letters to the state. It has the ability to take off as many as 700 workforce housing units. So why we have to do all of these very difficult changes in lieu of that potentially happening right now, it seems to me that we should be waiting on all that. We should see what happens with some of that. Imagine having hundreds of new units at Sigsbee right here in town. It would take all of the pressure off of workforce and affordable housing. We should let that develop before we go into these radical things. So what I really wanted to talk about was the process of how this happened. We have a strange element in our ordinances that allow anyone to bring to the planning department and the planning board a change to our land development regulations. Interestingly, Commissioner Haskell, who's here, at the last commission meeting asked to create an ordinance for like the next commission meeting to remove that, because it's very weird that I could come up with an ordinance that says, you know, for my property, I promise I will follow all HARC guidelines if you drop my property taxes by 30%. I mean, kind of obscene, absurd. I mean, if I were to submit that, it would get thrown out immediately because there's a lot of things wrong with it. But that's exactly what actually happened here. The Live Local Act that the state enacted set a set of incentives to developers that said, okay, if you do workforce housing, you get these incentives. And in fact, you have to do some workforce housing. A group here in town on their own last July created what I call 19 pages of edits. It's 19 pages, which has now become 16 pages because the definitions aren't there, of edits to our land development regulations. This is a huge change. There are changes that I've probably read it 30 times and I still don't understand some of it. I can't believe anyone understands everything that's going on with this. It is a large and complex set of changes. But what it is, to net it all out, it's basically, well, we'll follow, you know, putting the affordable housing in. We'll follow this Live Local Act, but we want more incentives, like removing art, like removing landscaping, like removing setbacks, all these things that, for us, remove the quality of life. And the reality is the incentives that developers have here are unbelievable. This is one of the most vibrant development communities, the ability to have year-round housing, all kinds of projects in the world. There are very few communities like this. That's the incentive. Developers come from all over the world to develop here. You know, a lot of the big projects here, the owners don't live here. They put money in, they develop, and they're gone. It's because this is such a great place to develop. We don't need these incentives. I mean, no more than removing my property taxes for following the law. They should follow the law as it exists. Now, if they want incentives, the way incentives are generally done in any kind of legislation is, well, if you go above the law, if you go beyond the law, I'm willing to see incentives done, like they have to do 30% workforce housing, really 40% if you look at Live Local. But let's just say 30%. Well, if they go 50%, if they do a development project and put 50%, yeah, I think we should have incentives for that. But to follow the law, No, follow the law. We don't need more incentives. We don't need a reduction in quality of life. Thank you.
Steve Russ, 3220 Riviera Drive. I don't have the experience of some of the previous speakers on zoning issues, but we have recently had a commercial redevelopment put in and approved across the street from my home. And a couple of issues that came out of that I think address this. Had we not had setback requirements and had we had not other zoning constraints, the developer would have gone ahead and put up a real schlock kind of setup there. But as homeowners, we had some leverage and we were able to get adequate landscaping, adequate setbacks, entrance and exit requirements that were compatible with our lifestyle across the street. Without that leverage, I'm sure they would have gone ahead and done whatever was the most cost-effective approach for the builder, which is a reasonable thing from their perspective. Other issues here, workforce housing is critical, but we can't change the nature of our community to make workforce housing. This issue of height is one good example. The question of development of commercial districts adjacent to residential units. Well, is that physically adjacent? You have to share a property line? Or is it like in our case, across the street, adequate protection? Something that needs to be defined. The reduction in the limit of what is low-income housing, I don't understand, frankly, why you would go from 60% down to a 50%. But apparently, there's some logic to that someone hopefully will explain. In any case, we have to be real careful that the unintended consequences of some of these things don't turn around and bite us. So, thank you.
Hello, my name is John Martini. I'm a 50-year resident at 810 Galveston Lane in Key West. I've owned several businesses here, and I've paid attention to the politics here. I'm not sure many people here remember that more than 50 years ago, Bill Restray and a group of Key West citizens and residents fought a vigorous battle, very, very strong battle, and they won. And that battle was to limit the height of buildings. And now we're going to go back. These are people who had a vision. What I've seen lately is a total lack of vision. I see that, I'm sorry, I'm not a speaker. I see that Key West is not a destination, it's a residence. The residents come first. We need to make rules and regulations that honor the fact that we live here, we're residents, we're not just a tool of the downtown business enterprise. And that's just, I just want to remind you about Bill Restray and that fight. And it was mean. It was a terrible fight. And they won with this referendum. Thank you.
My name's Edie Hambright. I'm representing myself and my wife, Julia. I just want to echo the remarks that have been made by Leo, by Steve, by the different folks. I believe Mr. Bart Smith is taking care of his business people. My wife and I, as the folks have said, believe the residents do indeed need to come first. We need long-term rental residences. We need affordable housing, or we're not going to have anyone here to take care of everybody, between police officers, nurses, secretaries. We have servers. We have people who clean our teeth. We have all of these folks, and they need to have places to live, and we need to keep the requirement in there for the affordable housing. However it is framed, whatever loophole was tried, that does not seem the right way to go. I'm very, very disappointed in the planning board with all the yeses recently. I'm very proud of Ray Warren with his nose. That takes a lot of courage. I'm real glad to see a lot of good folk here today. Don't know which way you stand, but I hope we can raise our voices to support having a Key West, having a community that we can really stay vibrant. We don't need all this height stuff. It looks pretty good where I see it now. And we need to keep all of the art. We need to keep all of the landscaping, all of the ways to make sure that we're safer in the flooding that's going to get deeper and the winds that are going to get stronger. So I really hope that all of you will keep supporting the no's, that all of you will tell other people and make sure they support it and they talk to the folks who are in charge. We appreciate our planning city department. I've seen them do so many good things the last several years, and we need to be supporting the research they've done, the hard work they've done, the hard choices they do. Thank you.
My name is Karen Siegel. I live at 727 Washington Street. And I don't pretend to understand this. I don't pretend to understand the development. I don't pretend to understand the ordinances. But I just have a feeling about this. As a resident, I feel like we're being held hostage. Like, you don't have to follow the rules. You have to be incented to follow the rules. There are rules on the books. They were put there for a reason. They were put there to protect the people who live in this community. Do I have to be incented to drive the speed limit? I feel like we're being bribed. I don't know what the right word is, but it's wrong. There are rules. We should all have to follow them. Thank you.
We'll go ahead and hear from some folks on Zoom while everyone here is thinking about what to say next. Thanks, Ben.
Yes, we have Hannah Edwards.
Okay.
Hi there. First of all, thank you so much for having this meeting. I think it's so important to get the public's input. I was at the last planning board meeting and mentioned that and was told, well, we've been discussing this issue for 6 months, but most people don't go to planning board meetings because they don't think this type of thing is being discussed. I don't think it was really publicized that this type of thing was being discussed. And there was no Zoom option, so people that needed to be at work or home with their children could not participate. So I really appreciate this. Thank you so much for making this an option. I think, we've discussed some of the other issues, but I think with the Live Local, a lot of those Live Local provisions, from the way I look at it, were really designed for different places than Key West. They were talking about larger metro areas where you might have to make some consensus, to redevelop a strip mall, say, or add housing in a commercial district. But down here, we already have kind of figured out what our island can handle. So if we're going to take away more landscaping and add more impervious surfaces, there would need to be some serious studies behind that to show that that's feasible. I don't think we want to just allow that, Also, I just want to point out that, it seems like a lot of these developers want to move towards a type of living situation for affordable housing, which would allow a lot of transient workers to be here in dormitory style living. And I just want them to be aware, how that's going to work in the future. Do we want to be a type of place where we have very wealthy people that live here, and then we have workforce that comes down for a few years and works and leaves? Or do we want to preserve the character of this area and have lots of different types of people in different income brackets, all raising their families here and making this a vibrant place to live? Because that's what I want, and I think that's what a lot of other people want too. But if you keep moving in that direction of building out affordable housing into these big structures, dormitory style, that's what you're going to end up with. It's going to be like Nantucket or like a theme park. You know, it's not going to be a real town anymore. So I just, those are my thoughts. And, you know, I think we do need the landscaping. As someone who lives in affordable housing, we value that landscaping, that green space. You know, we want to walk our dogs. We want to play with our kids. We don't want to live in a city block, you know, concrete block. So thanks for letting us speak. I appreciate it.
So no one else is on Zoom. Who's next? Commissioner?
I wasn't going to speak, but Sam Kaufman, I am District 2 Commissioner, City of Key West. I'm in my 10th year as City Commissioner, and I can't tell you how many disappointments there have been on this topic over the last 10 years. I could talk about this for hours. But the reason I'm speaking, and I chose to speak, is I really have to speak on the issue of redevelopment and how harmful this will be for us if we go forward. And I want to adopt every comment from the public before me, because, I mean, you guys are wonderful. All the speakers have been spot on. I mean, us removing AIPP, public art, really? We're going to consider that? That would be awful. We're talking about impervious versus all the flooding we've had. Just remember 2 weeks ago. We're going to change that? Really? But all those comments, I adopt them. Now, I need to speak because of redevelopment. We heard the applicant speak about Stadium Trailer Park. Remember, the last City Commission fought hard to bring back the inclusionary affordable housing requirement for residential development, redevelopment. That was only added in the last few years, okay, that requirement. What does that mean tangibly? Let's talk about Stadium Trailer Park, which is in my district, District 2. 180 trailers in the main trailer park area, approximately, right? What's 30% of 180? 54? That means 54 units that would otherwise be required for affordable housing would be gone. That's what we're talking about. If you're removing the redevelopment requirement, inclusionary requirement for redevelopment of residential housing. Who wants those 54 units? Raise your hand. We all want 54 units, right? But we're not going to get those if you remove redevelopment as a requirement for affordable housing. Let's talk about commercial. Let's talk about commercial redevelopment. Searstown. Who read the article about Searstown? What an utter failure by the city not to require housing at Searstown. Who agrees with that? Raise your hand. We all agree with that, right? Why did that happen? And what is the biggest red flag in all of this? Why is the city not leading these changes in our LDRs, in our land development regulations? Why are private developers leading this? It should be the city. And by the way, if you go back and you look at a recent planning board meeting, you'll see that the city staff had their own proposal for these changes. Why did those get set aside? Why are those not being discussed at this meeting? Why is staff not the applicant here? I mean, the city is working on our behalf, right? As one of the speakers, I think the first gentleman spoke about that. Anyway, let's get back to commercial redevelopment. And I wasn't going to say anything, okay? But it's important to say this. Commercial redevelopment, the city in the last 10 years has done everything possible to encourage our local businesses to build housing, okay? Searstown, overseas market, right? We increased density bonus to 40 units per acre. That was done for a purpose, right? In the last administration of management, they were charged by the city commission with a ZIP ordinance to create a new ordinance for the requirement of redevelopment in commercial spaces like Searstown. City dropped the ball on that. We all dropped the ball on that. And now what happened? I don't know if Mr. Smith represents the folks at Searstown, but as soon as possible, they filed their application and that's pending and that's what's going before you. Why does that hurt me as a small business owner? Because I have to compete with these businesses. And not every new business has to have inclusionary affordable housing, but if you're going to increase your square footage and you're going to have a ton new employees, then you should be required to produce some more affordable housing for your own business. Anyway, I'm so glad you all are here today. We have a lot of work to do. Let's make sure that redevelopment is not abandoned as a requirement for affordable housing. Thank you.
So I listened to a lot of the comments, and I just wanted to address some of them so you understand the impetus for it. And I heard the impervious surface one mentioned several times. Impervious surface, absolutely. Impervious surface is the amount of surface that does not allow water to pass through. Modern developments are required. All developments are required to show that all drainage remains on site from a 25-year storm with 72-hour duration. It's a requirement that's required by South Florida Water Management District, the Department of Environmental Protection, and your code still has those impervious surface requirements. The waivers that we talk about when we talk about impervious surface is allowing for additional impervious surface. That does not waive the requirement that your development maintain all the stormwater on site. When you see problems with drainage, that's typically a property that was developed prior to the adoption of these drainage requirements by the state and the local governments. I'll give you an example. The Sears Town, that was developed in the 50s. Drainage is non-existent as it is today. The Sears Town, when it redevelops it to provide for appropriate drainage where it keeps it on site, is going to be raising the site about 1.5 feet, because the whole idea is if you don't have enough height above groundwater, you can't drain. And so when you see things redevelop or new developments, what you will notice is that they have to provide a new drainage system that maintains it on site. And so no one's looking at these requirements from impervious surface to building coverage as identifying that these are going to be an impediment to the neighbors or to the streets. They're still required to maintain the drainage on site. For an example, CG District, which is the commercial corridor, the maximum impervious surface right now is 60%. So you'd be required to have 40% open space. The building coverage is 40%, which means that if you have an acre property, you can only build about 12,000 square feet. What happens is you can't really actually build to any density where you could build an affordable housing project because of the lower building coverage and the impervious surface. If you could increase that impervious surface to 80%, which is what the county has, then, and you'd still have 20% open space, you get 20% more space that you can develop. If you increase the building coverage to 60 or 80%, you're able to build an actual project of mass and scale that can provide a lot of units. And so nobody's looking at these things and not anticipating that, look, you need to make sure that you do not have an impact on neighbors. That's why we're working on words like adjacent to make sure that the neighborhoods adjacent to these properties are not being harmed by landscaping, because they're still required along those sides. The landscaping still required, the setback's still required. And so we're looking at these things holistically and trying to get to a solution that we hope satisfies you. I know we can't satisfy everyone, but the goal is to provide things that will get these projects built. Every one of these projects I've worked on, in order to get built, have required the code to be changed to get to these standards. The height, and I don't know if somebody sent this to Jason Hogel. I was planning on being in a smaller room, and I actually had handouts of an example of the height. Is Jason back there? Is it Jason? You got it? Can you put that example of height up? Did Brandy send that to you? So that's I'll keep it on that for a second. So this is the map of the area that's proposed. And if you look at that yellow line, all of those setbacks, landscaping, are all required to be maintained because they are adjacent to a neighborhood. None of those are being affected. So if you look at it, every boundary is protected, and it's only internal setbacks with similar properties, i.e. the commercial properties or the multifamily that's MDR and MDR1. MDR1 is another interesting one. That's Point Siena. It only has a 50% building coverage. That's an impediment to get anything a lot more done on Point Santa Gardens. So we're looking at trying to get these things developed in places that are suitable for a higher density. Most of these districts, by the way, already have 40 units per acre, because the CG, as Commissioner Kaufman stated, already has a density bonus of 40 units per acre. Going to, just to be clear on the redevelopment, Flagler Station burnt down. Those are people's individual homes. If redevelopment is required, then certain people would be told that they have to deed restrict their units that was burnt down, because that's what redevelopment would go to. So I do not agree that redevelopment should require someone to have to decide which homes are considered affordable. The Searstown, they're decreasing the square footage, and I can state unequivocally that if there was a requirement just because of an improvement, that they were pencils down and would not improve the property. That was the mandate. They would not improve the property if there was a requirement for redevelopment. So, as I stated, there is not things that will provide it if you're requiring redevelopment. You will discourage people. They will band-aid their properties. You will not see things improved. All of the affordable housing that's being developed is being developed in larger scale. The appropriate places are those in green. They're appropriate for density. They're on main thoroughfares. They're not. We're not looking to put anything adjacent to single-family homes. And look, we're willing to look at these things. If art in public places is important, then it's a cost. It's a cost to the developer, and if that's something that the commissioners say leave it in, I don't feel that that's going to kill what could get projects done. I can just tell you unequivocally that when you do a $20 million project and as you have 200,000 in art in public places, that's approximately the cost of one unit. So you're going to do one unit less is what's going to happen. So it's that absolutely. That was me. No, that was me. Sunset Marina. Commissioner Cates asked me on the dais, how do you get more units? And I said, I'm at my cost limit. And so we did the art in public places. I love it. I love the art we did out there. I mean, it's beautiful. But I stated that on the record, so I'm stating it again. Look, we all have the goal of having a livable community. We all have different visions of how it's going to occur. I am hopeful to get some of your support. I know I won't get it all, but I'm hopeful that I can get some of your support. Thank you.
Who's next? All right, I'm gonna ask you a question. I wanted to get your feedback and input on something that was brought up by one of the speakers and then Bart specifically. So my understanding of the proposed code amendment is that if you are rebuilding, let's just take Searstown since Bart brought that one up, and you are reconstructing the entire shopping center, but your reconstruction either doesn't increase square footage or you only increase your square footage by 999 square feet. The proposed ordinance would not require a dollar of fee in lieu or even one unit. Is that correct? I think it is. So I guess my question is, what is the balance between, as Bart, and if you're a business owner, great to keep in mind how you would feel if you were redeveloping your own property. What is that balance between trying to move the needle a little bit on workforce housing and not disincentivizing renovations to businesses? Because we all want our businesses that we frequent to look good, feel good, and do well. So I just ask if if you haven't made a comment on that already, it would be helpful input for staff, and I think the applicant and planning board also, to hear from you. And it actually extends also to residential, and Commissioner Kaufman spoke about the mobile home, but let's say you're a landover of 4 units or 9 units and you haven't renovated your units for a long time. Well, what is fair? If you're changing out kitchen cabinets and bathroom appliances, should you have to pay any kind of fee or restrict any of those units for workforce housing, or should there be no requirement at all? Again, the question is, are you disincentivizing redevelopment or renovation or repair to your 9-unit multifamily structure? Or are we trying to ask for a reasonable commitment by that landlord in order to try to maintain some of those units that might have been older, maybe they were affordable by default, but to try to keep some of them reserved for the workforce? So I just ask for more input on that for both commercial redevelopment and residential, for anybody to come up, or, you know, elected officials or planning board, if you want to chime in.
Hi, Monica Haskell, 321 Pecan Lane, City Commissioner, District 1. And I will address Mr. Browning. Are you still there? There you are. You asked a question at the start of the meeting that wasn't really germane to the topic of this meeting, but since you asked the question, I'm going to answer it. And I think you asked, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone had other ideas for affordable housing to bring them forward. Did I understand that correctly? Okay, thank you. So I would like to see a pathway to small-scale affordable housing constructed on existing lots in existing neighborhoods. Now, Key West has always had a reputation of being the kind of community where the rich and the poor lived next to each other, you know. And that was part of what made this community charming and interesting and diverse and unique. And now most of those less expensive houses have been converted, you know, into vacation rentals. So there's less and less of that neighborhood, mixed neighborhood kind of situation. I know that Commissioner Carey has put together and proposed, and they were passed, a path to accessory units, building an accessory unit. And I think that that's a good start. And I think that if, you know, we have the BPAS units available, if we have the building permits available, to incentivize private residents to build on their own property, or maybe to divide their home that used to be a multi-family structure or a rooming house or something of that nature, and now has been, you know, made into a single-family home. So to incentivize citizens, individual property owners, to create an additional small-scale, one-unit, you know, kind of home on their property that could be rented, probably. That would work better than try to sell it since it's on one piece of property. But anyway, I just would like to see that explored as a possible additional solution in addition to the large-scale affordable housing development that we see that is put together by AH and the Housing Authority and other Habitat for, I love Habitat for Humanity. I would love to see Habitat for Humanity have the opportunity to do more buildings for either rental or for home ownership. And an advantage that Habitat has is that one is that they have slightly different regulations for determining eligibility. In most of our publicly funded public housing, if you are in workforce housing, your income has to be at least this much, but not more than this much. And this is a disincentive to bettering yourself. So if you get a raise, if you make more money, you're above that threshold, and then either your rent goes up or you have to move out. So that is because of the rules and regulations that we have. But Habitat, I'm not sure about their rentals actually, but for their home ownership program, when someone is eligible for their home ownership program, then they do not have to recertify every year. whereas our other public affordable housing, you do have to recertify your income every single year. In the county, there has been circulating kind of a discussion to come up with a new definition of workforce housing, and I like that, and I would like us to see that, see us explore that too. So that's my suggestion number 2, and that would be that the income requirements would be changed to just the requirement that a resident must live and work and derive a certain proportion of their income. The percentage of 70% has been used in the city or the county, whatever the entity is. For us, it would be the city. So those are my 2 ideas, the smaller accessory units and the broader, different definition of what would constitute workforce housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jeff Siegel again. I'm sorry to speak a second time. I wanted to address something that Katie asked about Searstown, and because I was here at the February Planning Board meeting speaking, and but before that item came up about this. The Searstown item came up, and I wasn't really that familiar with it, but I was pretty shocked at what happened. So here's what's happening. Searstown is being demolished to the ground. It's all going. They're ripping it all up, and they're building all the new buildings back. But it's not a redevelopment. I mean, it's not a new construction. It's a redevelopment. I mean, I don't understand how that happens. So these buildings that were built in 1965 are being completely demolished. I mean, they're going away. Not one brick is staying. They are raising the whole platform, which is great. They're making wonderful parking. There's going to be some landscaping in the parking. It looks really nice. The drawings look really, really nice. But somehow it doesn't click into new development. It's a redevelopment. And so in their application to the planning board, they said, you know, they're not following the setbacks that's required. They're violating the setbacks completely. But they're saying, wait a second, this is a redevelopment. This isn't a new development. It's a redevelopment. So because we're not making the setbacks worse, we're not making them legal, but we're making them a little bit better. We don't need any of the setbacks. So that, I don't even know what the street is, the one street on the back of Searstown right now that should have 50 feet of setbacks, so things like fire trucks can go back there. No, it's going to be like 12 feet. And I may be wrong about the actual number, but it's way off of 50. All right. And so our planning board said, a majority said, you're right. This is a redevelopment. This isn't it's shocking. So Katie, you're absolutely right. It should be treated as a brand new development with brand new workforce affordable housing requirements and the whole bit. This is how we get into these problems because we're not following the actual laws, because I don't know how it happens, but the votes up here, and it was a 5-1 vote. And thank God for Ray Warren that he's on this commission. He's the only one, and I agree. Someone said before, it takes courage, and it does. It takes courage to stand up to the rest of them to say, no, this is wrong, and he's the one that consistently does that. And I'll say this too. Thank God for Commissioner Kaufman, who gets up here and says redevelopment is wrong. And getting off the Searstown piece, another thing that happened last month. So they broke up these changes that we're talking about today into 4 pieces. Our website, we asked the people that we're involved with, we put out an email blast. Will you write to the planning board and tell them we want a workshop even on the definitions, because we don't agree with the definitions that are being projected, even the redevelopment issue, which is part of the definitions. We don't agree with that. We want public comment on that. Can we have a workshop on those issues? More than 50 people sent messages to that board. All right. We know Mr. Varela opened up 100% of them. We know Mr. Browning opened up 50% of them because we're hackers. We do, our software does this. We know who actually opened up the messages. So they read them. And you know what happened? We got no public comment on it. They passed the definitions, even though there's a lot of disagreement. One of the things is, thankfully, they took out that redevelopment piece that Mr. Kaufman talked about. But thankfully, it's going to go to the commission. The commission's going to get the vote on that, and hopefully they put that back, because there's just something wrong with this board. I mean, something is needed to fix this. It really is. You know, no one comes to these meetings, and trust me, I don't want to come to these meetings. I'm talking about the board.
Okay, don't address it to the board and don't address it to individuals.
Do you want, am I doing anything wrong? Am I doing anything wrong?
Don't address it to the board, okay?
Tough. Too bad. Go sit down. Go sit down.
You know, if you're going to attack us, you know, you and I talked, Jeff, several times, all right?
Mr. Brown, yes.
And you called me Michael and I called you Jeff, all right? So, you know, I think I was always respectful for you, to you. I'd expect the same to the board. While we may disagree on things, you know, this is, like you said, this is a community. So please don't address the board as though we're some kind of, you know, malevolent entity. You know, we live here. We're doing the best we can, all right? So I'd appreciate that.
My statement was that there's a problem on the board, and I agree that there's a problem on the board. If you come to the meetings, you'll see it. And I'm sorry that I don't like the decisions that are made, but they're kind of made a lot in the darkness. You know, what do you know? People come to the board for variances. What do you think the planning department? They judge every variance that comes to the board. There's about a 80%. I mean, correct me, Katie. I've only looked at about maybe 10 meetings. There's about 80%. They suggest denial of the variances. What do you think the acceptance rate is that the board does? It's 100%. It's 100%. There's a problem with that, where 80% should be denied based on the educated, experienced people on the planning department, but the board says, in fact, they never even ask a question, or never, that's wrong. They rarely even ask a question of the planning department. It's amazing. And the thing is, if you go to a HARC meeting, that's a whole lot different. You know, that's a give and take. There's a lot of discussion. That's a healthy board. Go to some of those meetings and see. The problem is that we don't have this kind of participation. This is what we need. We need it at commission meetings. We need it at planning board meetings, because otherwise all this stuff happens. One of the things that we do is our organization, protectourresidentialneighborhoods.com, is that we rate every vote made by the commission that falls into areas that we believe residents need protection on, things like overdevelopment, water quality, public safety, cultural things like art and literature and music in the town. And we rate their votes, and then we compile them together. Look at how these ratings are, because it shows how the commissioners are working for us too. And we're gonna follow that through all the way to the next election, because there's some issues there as well. There's a lot of things that happen that don't make the press. There's no investigative journalists in this town. So we're trying to show how the votes happen. Please get the word out. protectourresidentialneighborhoods.com. Go there. There's no money. We don't take money. We don't ask for money. We're just trying to make everything a little bit more in the open here. Thank you.
Oh, come on up.
Steve Russ again. On the issue of impermeable and water retention, I think one of the things we have to be aware of is that Key West is an Ocala. And in terms of our water issues, they're much more significant here than they may be in other parts of the state. So if a state standard is the benchmark, perhaps the benchmark yet needs to be raised a little more for us. In the issue of accessory units, my house was wrecked in Hurricane Wilma in 2005. And when we rebuilt, because my wife and I were both involved with the local arts community, we put an accessory unit that's 300 square feet out behind our house. We don't rent it, but we do use it to house out-of-town actors, dancers, authors, whatever, for the various community, arts community organizations. At one point in time, the city was assembling a list of what properties could be rented. So I thought, well, it wouldn't hurt our property value if that were a rentable property. So I went to try and see what it would take to make it a rentable property. The amount of money that would require in back taxes. I had to go back and pay taxes for when the unit was built if I wanted to register, at least as far as I understood it. And it was just a lot of hoops, and in the end, it wasn't worth it. But if you want to have accessory units that can be used as workforce housing, you need to aggressively address the issue and put a program together as a community to encourage people to do that, not throw hurdles in the way of what otherwise should be a pretty simple proposition. Thank you.
So I think what Mr. Russ was referencing was the lawful unit determination process. The city has a process to recognize units that predated the last census. And then if you do have a recognized units, you have to pay back utility fees for that unit. One of our challenges in building more of that small scale development is that we have almost no BPAS units left. And as you know, there's an ongoing discussion with the county and the state as to whether the evacuation time of QS should change or go up to some degree to allow for the city and other municipalities in the county to have more units. Two things that I haven't heard a lot of input on are the proposed change to our linkage provisions. Right there, there's a definition. Basically, if you are required to provide deed-restricted workforce housing, right now our code reads that you can provide it in the city limits or in Stock Island. And there's a proposal to allow for that to go further up the keys. So if you haven't talked about that, please give us some input. Also, there's a proposal to allow a transfer of development rights, and I can't remember if Bart covered that very much or not. Basically, that would allow if you have a building permit allocation system permit, if you have a unit on your site and you want to transfer it or sell it to someone else to build a unit somewhere else on the site, Bart's proposing that we create an ordinance to do that. Staff has some thoughts about some guardrails or in what scenarios we should allow that kind of transfer, but if you have thoughts on that, we'd really be interested in hearing from you. And then also, Commissioner Haskell had some points. I'm very interested to know what people think about the county's definition that she brought up, where maybe there shouldn't be an income limit. Maybe we should call workforce housing a workforce housing unit, just a unit that houses someone who's working within the city, deriving 70% of their income from employment in the city. I know other elected officials have said we should have a ceiling on that. So if you're making more than 160% of area median income, then you're no longer workforce. So those are some things that would be great to have input on. One more thing Commissioner Haskell brought up was if you have an existing single-family home, maybe in the single-family zoning district, should you be able to come to the planning board and say, hey, I want to divide it and create a duplex? That might mean allowing duplexes as of right or as a conditional use in the single-family zoning district. So if you have thoughts on that, would love to hear from you. So we're here to hear from you guys, so come on up. Come on. Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to answer the question?
So there's a couple different parts to that question. And one is there's, for traffic studies, typically you do it when the development's actually developed. So because it has to be real-time data, not theoretical. So like, let's say somebody has a linkage project that they're doing 5 years from now. The traffic could be different. They're talking about adding a light at the other end of College Road. Every 2 years, the county, in conjunction with the FDOT pays for it. They do a traffic study of the level of service in the entire Florida Keys all the way through the Triangle. And they do that in segments. Stock Island is segment 1. And it's operating at level of service B right now, which is like, it has something like 2,500 reserve trips of capacity. per day. And then there's what? It's decent. I mean, like, so like a level service A, like let's do like Rockland, the 2 lanes each way that you can just cruise through. That's a level service A. That's like 20,000 trips of reserve capacity, and you can see it. You never stop on Rockland for anything. But yes, so unless you're going to Charlie Tino and Sons or something up there. So whenever you're working on a project, there are traffic studies that are required of the individual project to show concurrency and that you're not exceeding levels of service. And then you have to do peak AM and peak PM also, so those peak hours to show what effect it would have on that peak hour. And you have to show compliance with those to meet the traffic concurrency when you do the actual individual project. So it's more of a project by project basis. And so when you do one on Stock Island, you have the same thing. You have to show concurrency. But yes, it is done for every development of more than 2 units. So.
Okay, but I think another answer also might be, I don't think we've looked at as a city at what the net or the gross effect would be of changing the policy and having, every development that's required to contribute some workforce housing, all of those units being constructed at mile marker 10 or 20. We haven't done that. Come on up. You have a question? Do you want us to? Yeah, so we can hear you and so that Zoom can record your question. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Mary Splain. I live at 524 Margaret. I am also an employee of Keys Last Stand, but I'm speaking for myself today. I agree with a lot of the comments, the public comments. I agree with almost all of them that were said, especially what Mr. Siegel has said. I've been looking at this issue for a long time, and I must say the linkage provision is one thing that really upsets me. When you take a look at it, taxpayers are funding developers. We're incentivizing them to remove workers from the city. And that just strikes me as wrong. And I do think there's going to be a lot of dormitory style housing. And I know personally, if I wanted to live in Key West and raise a family, I don't want to live with 4 other roommates. I want my own home. I want my kids to have a home. And I don't think this will get us there. Thank you.
Hi, Miriam Bedrick, 621 Grinnell Street. I think I heard that the linkage might allow the building to go as far up as Big Pine Key. Did I hear that correctly?
It's that policy is being discussed by the planning board. I think right now it's Shark Key. Is that what was approved on the 20th? West of Shark Key Bridge. So it's still will be looked at by City Commission.
Well, I'd just like to say yesterday, my husband and I went up to Big Pine Key to visit people. It took us 50 minutes to get there. Our friend is in construction. He said he has to leave there at 6:20 in the morning so he doesn't get into big traffic jams. The other issue is you have to have a car, and that's like 30 miles up and 30 miles back. That's a lot of money for people, and they really have to have that kind of transportation in order to get to work. So that just seems like an extra burden to me, to workers in the city. So I think as close to the city as possible is the way to go. Thank you.
Yes, my name's Chaz Hickey. I live at 715 Olivia. And I just have a simple question as to what is the definition or the measure of to the greatest extent practical as far as the waivers are concerned?
So Bart and I can both answer this, but that is a phrase that's included in Bart's requested code amendment. It is, he'll be able to answer as a lawyer what his understanding of it is, but for staff, it's going to be a term that's difficult for staff to implement clearly or administer clearly to the greatest extent practicable sounds like a push and pull, and it's always easier when staff has a very objective or measurable requirement in the code to say, yes, it's here, or yes, it's not here. So, I know it was in version 1, Bart, where when there was no variance required. Now the version that we're looking at now allows for a non-hardship waiver, which is not the same thing as a variance. So I did have some questions myself, actually, about, what are the notice procedures, or what are the parameters for that waiver? I think right now we would be missing some criteria for how the planning board would determine whether they would allow for the waiver or not, for landscaping, parking, yeah, go ahead.
So for notice, you already have non-hardship waivers in the code, so it would be the same noticing provisions that are required for those. For instance, there is a waiver right now in the code for parking when you provide, I think it's 4 bicycle racks, you can get 1 parking space waiver. And it's a non-hardship waiver, and that's in the code. And I think it has the same requirements for notice as a variance, if my recollection's correct, but I would rely on the code for what the notice requirements are for that. To the greatest extent practicable, it's basically, it's a determination by the board that the waiver is needed and necessary to develop the maximum amount of affordable housing units. For instance, if your maximum density is 40 units per acre, all right? So you already have a max density, okay? So 40 units per acre with 3 stories, you're basically having, just trying to do the math in my head, it's about 8,000 square foot per floor. So 24,000 square feet per building, 2 buildings. So you got 16,000 square feet, and then you're going to need parking. You can't build 40 units per acre with less than 60 to 70% building coverage, and about the same for impervious surface. And if I go back to the CG right now, you have a 40% building coverage and a 60% impervious. So even if you put 40 units per acre as your density, which they've already done for CG, you can't actually build it based on the impervious and the building coverage. So the reason that we're providing a non-hardship waiver is because otherwise you would have to apply for a variance. And Mr. Siegel's incorrect actually about how many variances are recommended for denial. It's probably about 99%. Because the hardship condition required means you can't come to the hardship. You can't create it. Basically, the hardship had to be created by the zoning laws being enacted. So the fact of the matter is 99% of variances do not get recommended for approval because they don't meet the hardship requirement. And the city of Key West was developed well before land development codes, and everyone's property was made non-conforming by the adoption of the codes. Thus the reason there's so many variances that need to be requested, and so the board looks at them practically. The problem is if you apply for a variance, even if it's granted, if it is appealed, I will state that it is 99.9% likely that the approval of the variance is going to get overturned by the court because you do not meet the hardship criteria. And so when you have the hardship criteria, nobody makes it, and if anyone appeals it, the project's dead. The reason for a non-hardship was to allow the board in its discretion for the development of affordable housing to get the standards to where they need to be. Because there's not a district that will allow you to build 40 units per acre based on the building coverage and impervious surface as they exist today. So.
Good afternoon, Lisa Carey, District 4 Commissioner for the City of Key West. I just wanted to make a few brief comments. I know we have to be careful with the other commissioners in the room to not comment on each other's comments. One thing that is very striking to me sitting at the back of the room is the fact that the workforce is not present. So we're talking about workforce housing and they're all working. And I understand, I'm sorry, what was that, Ms. Siegel? That's my very point. I would be working too. I'm taking annual leave to be here today. But that's my very point. We're having a discussion about the workforce, and they're not able to be present right now. So I would ask everyone to please reach out to the workforce when we're making these decisions and trying to figure out what's best for them. It's important that they have a voice also. So that was my point. I'm glad you said that, Ms. Siegel. That's correct. They are at work. And then I'll just make a general statement about my feeling. I was born and raised in this town. I've lived here my entire life. And I am always very careful in my decisions towards overdevelopment of this island. It's a 2x4 island. We have to be very careful about what we're doing here. Mr. Smith, I know you're very smart and I respect you very much. But again, there are some potential projects out there. I think somebody brought up the Navy housing. It's my understanding there's a possibility of 1,000 units to put out there on the Navy base. And the Navy would need 300 units to house Navy personnel. And there's no requirement for BPAS. So again, we have to be careful in all of the decisions that we're making and just have a broader look over the entire island when we're doing these things. I do have some questions about in redevelopment, like you made the statement about the units that are on Flagler. Yeah, and when we're talking about redevelopment and a unit is destroyed due to a natural disaster or occurrence, can you talk about that a little bit more? Because I think that has a huge effect. If somebody, you know, if they lose their home to a storm that comes through or a fire, if you could speak a little bit more to that. And I'm going to go sit down while you talk about it, but I also want to thank the planning board. And I think it's really important for everyone to remember that all of our boards are 100% volunteer. So let's be respectful of them. I'm thankful for my appointee, Mr. Varela, and just want to say thank you all. And again, it's important to maintain respect for them. Thank you.
Thank you. So there were some points brought up by Bart earlier in prior planning board hearings about that exact example. For example, the however many individually owned condominium units were at that Flagler Street multifamily complex that had the commercial on the bottom floor. And staff heard those criticisms of our existing residential workforce housing ordinance. And so we drafted some suggested language to perhaps exempt individually owned condominiums from having to comply with the workforce housing ordinance. Bart subsequently told us that what we had drafted was not in compliance with state law, that we couldn't provide an exemption for a condominium unit, but not for other units. I don't think that, I mean, I think that there may be a way to provide some relief for someone whose unit or home has burnt or been destroyed by a hurricane, for example, but to not entirely do away with our workforce housing ordinance, the residential component of it. So I think there's a way there. I'm not an attorney, but I know that there are attorneys who could probably assist us to make that kind of balance I was talking about earlier, where we don't want to, you know, require you, John homeowner, to deed restrict your own unit that has recently burned down. We understand that doesn't seem reasonable. Thank you, Commissioner Carey, for your comments. Planning board, we haven't heard a lot from you. Did you want to make any comments at this time? We've got some more time. It's 2:30. We've got until 3 o'clock. We were just going to wrap up and summarize starting in a couple minutes. So, and the floor is open for anybody who wants to come up again and speak.
Katie, we do have one person on Zoom again as well.
Hear from this gentleman here, and then we'll go to Zoom.
Awesome.
Thanks, Ben.
Good afternoon. I'm Fred Covan, 1801 Seidenberg Avenue. I'm also Vice President of Last Stand. But I'm speaking as somebody who's worried. I grew up in an area of New York City called Greenwich Village, which was a center of art and creativity. And during my time there, I saw it destroyed by overdevelopment, by commercialism, and I'm scared that I'm seeing that going on here. And I believe it's our responsibility to be vigilant that any kind of development and any kind of sponsoring by local attorneys for the development has to be very carefully monitored. I have a friend who won the lottery once, and he went to a party because he was now part of a different social environment. And somebody came up to him and asked him how he got to be at this party, and he said he won the lottery. And this guy said, well, how much did you make? And the guy said, I made $100,000. And the other guy kind of bristled and said, I make that in a week. And my friend said to him, well, I have something that you'll never have. And the guy said, what's that? And the answer was, enough. Be careful. Be careful. There are so many ways around our restrictions. Workforce housing that we've had in the past is now high-end for market cost. Be careful. Be scared. Be paranoid. And I'm a psychologist, and paranoia is sometimes adaptive.
Just 1 second, we're going to hear the Zoom question, and then we'll hear from you. Thank you.
Yeah, Hannah, you can go ahead again.
Hi, I just wanted to speak to some of the questions that were asked regarding linkage. I really don't think we should allow linkage past Stock Island. We already have serious traffic problems, and the whole point of employee housing and affordable housing is to bring people closer to their employment, not make them drive further. And as one of the speakers mentioned, it costs a lot of money to drive in from Big Pine. Also about redevelopment, for the commercial, is there any way to figure out like if the redevelopment will require more employees? Because that would be something which, if it would require more employees, then they would need to, I would think they would need to do more affordable housing. But if it wouldn't require any more employees, then, you know, seems like kind of a wash. Residential redevelopment. I think this, you know, really does, it's a tricky issue because if you're going to take, say, 5 units that were rented pretty cheaply because they were older and redevelop them into, you know, very fancy units and rent them top dollar, then you are losing that housing. So is there any way to link it to what they're rented at currently, or to look at that in any way, or to provide an incentive in like if, you know, if a certain percentage of them are affordable for this smaller amounts, maybe between like 4 and 10, could they then get a tax break on the rent for all 10 units? Or something to sweeten the deal a little bit. But I don't want to, how can we can't lose those units of affordable housing, even if they're not officially deed restricted. And then what Commissioner Haskell was saying, yeah, at the top limit is a real issue with affordable rentals because people do turn down promotions because they don't want to lose their housing. So that's, you know, a real benefit of home ownership, affordable home ownership, is that you're not going to lose your housing. You can take that promotion. So I think that's something that we really need to concentrate on is, you know, turning existing homes into affordable housing, turning existing home ownership or single family or duplexes into affordable housing. And we can do that through different methods, different creative deed restrictions and creative incentivizing programs. You know, there are a lot of other places we can look to that are doing this. There's towns in Colorado that are doing really interesting things. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Like, we really need to start thinking about these creative solutions to turn some of our second homes, some of our vacation rentals back into affordable housing. And let's see. Yeah, and one other thing, yes, I am workforce. I'm taking PTO to be here for these couple hours, but having more opportunities for the workforce to get involved in this discussion would be great. And I appreciate this. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe Walsh at 429 Caroline Street. It's my belief that a quality, affordable workforce housing is the most important issue facing the Lower Keys and Key West. I've got 30 units that I rent affordably in the city. In the past, we've tried to develop some additional affordable housing in Old Town on top of commercial infill. It is specifically prohibited in the code. So on 2 separate times, I've made an effort to try to develop 6 affordable housing units. I have a multi-story building on one side of me. I've got a multi-story building on the other side. The floor area ratio of my building prevents us from securing additional units. Modifying the code in order to facilitate additional workforce is a desirable thing. I haven't read Mr. Smith's proposal, but there are a limited number of places that you can make an impact. The commercial general corridor along North Roosevelt is one of the biggest ones. Modifying the way that some of the city or the housing authority's properties are configured is another one. One of the other ones is the Sigsbee discussion that a couple people have brought up. The last time I was involved in that, I was lobbying Carlos Curbelo, then our congressman, who managed to put it into the, get it passed in the House of Representatives. And seven years ago, perhaps my granddaughter will be developing affordable housing at the time that that one finally comes together. One other thing in terms of the economics, it's expensive to build down here. Most of you probably already know that. If you're doing a small scale project, finding somebody who can build something for less than $400 a foot, if you've got that person, I'd like his number because I've got quite a bit of work for him. But if you look at a standard 2-bedroom apartment, it's approximately 1,000 square feet even. I can do the math on that. So no land costs, no soft costs, $400,000. What can you possibly rent that for in order for, unless you're an altruistic person or looking and you have an opportunity in your backyard that you happen to meet the setbacks, that you have enough money, and again, you believe enough in the idea. However, cities BPAS units are running out. There are 2 competing proposals in the legislature right now. As they currently stand, one of them would not allow any such thing. It's 1 unit per parcel. So it would not allow you to build a mother-in-law or affordable housing unit on your own property. So to me, the only 2 ways that you can really move the needle are larger scale projects, again, at Poinciana, redevelopment of Langmillion, the Trumbo Road project. And again, the Trumbo Road project, we need to go back about 4 or 5 mayors before the first time I was hearing about that project being redeveloped for affordable housing. So and again, it's a larger type units on top of potentially those commercial general projects, or 111 mother-in-law units, which again is getting smaller and smaller, the opportunities for those. So I would say that a number of the comments I found to be very interesting. I share a number of them in terms of quality of life, and this is a community that we live in. However, if we do not have more workforce units, then the community that we have will slowly be dying. Whether this plan is exactly right or whether we can tweak the edges, whether we're trying to put art in public places back in, adding bigger landscaping buffers, whatever, those all seem to me like they're reasonable things that most developers would probably buy into. But again, unless we can change the underlying idea to get more density and bluntly larger type projects that can economically work, or that there's available tax credit or other ways to fund them, we're simply going to be on a hamster wheel, not moving the wheel, not going anywhere, and slowly losing the community. Thank you. Oh, sorry, I had one other thing for the planning department. On the 70% Monroe County workforce requirement, On paper, that makes a lot of sense to me. In practice, there's quite a bit of the devil in the details. If you happen to retire from your job and you no longer are earning 70%, do you now get evicted? And so there are some pragmatic issues with that 70% workforce requirement on that. The other one in terms of income levels and affordability, to me, if you're at 140 or 160 AMI, which real quickly, that's how much money you make times 30% is approximately your rent. And so, and your 100 AMI is approximately $80,000. So at 120 AMI, you're at $96,000 plus 16 plus 16. So if you take that times 30%, to me, those are not affordable units. At 140 AMI or 160 AMI, on no world that I'm aware of are those affordable housing units. And so perhaps you can keep the limitation in terms of the pricing of the product, and then allow someone to take a promotion or to get overtime, and don't punish somebody for attempting to do better. But you need to cap how much a developer or how much that unit rents for in order to maintain the product. Thanks. I'm really done this time.
We'll take one more comment, and then we'll start to wrap up and summarize.
My name is Chris Massicott. I live at 1615 Laird Street, and $400 a square foot, Joe, that's funny. I wish I could find somebody under 400. If you got anybody under 500, it's incredibly expensive to build here. But we can do it. We can do it with, these public and private partnerships in the right way. I really loved what Commissioner Lee's been talking about, trying to engage the Navy to build on those 21 acres. We have places to build and to keep people here. I'm really much against this linkage idea of going all the way up to Little Torch or Big Pine or wherever it is. We do want people, to live as close to their work as humanly possible. But Joe is also right that some of the bills in Tallahassee might preclude us from, breaking up a bunch of these single-family homes here in Key West. But I always wonder how many bedrooms on any given day go unslept in this town. A lot. And we have to figure out a way to be able to do that. I sold a home a few years ago, and I specifically asked the purchaser if they were going to make it a vacation rental unit. She said no. But of course, she then turned around and sold it a year later, and it turned into a vacation rental unit. But I will tell you, that house, they're asking way too much for it, and it has been empty February and March. So if they could have done like a roommate situation where it's just one, unit, we can do that. So we need to figure out some way to incentivize homeowners that have these houses to rent to long-term renters. I know people say, oh, these luxury homes would never go. They could if you can figure out a way to do that. And there's some homes here that can be, incentivized to rent to long-term renters. I know we're trying to bank on some altruistic thing, for landlords, but not all of us can be Joe Walsh, and not all of us can be, me who rents, a few units affordably as well. But we can. We have to think outside the box, and really. And to Commissioner Carey's comments that people are at work right now that actually work, we need to figure out how we can keep those folks here in town working and being a part of this community, because it's our young people, it's our artists, it's our engineers at the wastewater treatment plant who I rent to. They're the ones that keep this place moving, and we have to continually be thinking of them first, and not insanely rich people who want their third, fourth, or fifth house. Thank you.
Katie, before we go on, I'd just like to address a couple of things. One, the proposal that came before this board was to go up to Big Pine. We, as a board, came back and said that was not acceptable, and made that linkage up to the bridge at Shark Key, which is mile marker 11. So I want to dispel that. Two, I agree with the comments regarding having these meetings after hours, which I proposed because I wanted workers here, people not having to take off work to get here. This was an accommodation that for a number of staff and so forth. But I agree that these should be after hours where workers could be here. And then Katie, I'd like a couple of quick things that you may point out. Mr. Smith, talked about what they're doing out there. We as a planning board take great care in that, as Mr. Smith said, most QS was built before there was a code. So most of your houses probably do not comply. The vast majority of variances that come before us are for people who have a special need. They want to add a bathroom on, but it's too close to the edge. These are not major developments that we are granting variances to. And some of the things that we have really taken into consideration is when somebody comes up for a variance, are they decreasing the footprint of that residence? And Katie's fine staff keeps track of that. And Katie, would you agree with me that we've been cognizant of that we have 3 newer members, but while I've been on this board, that we look to that as one of the criteria that we find important, that we provide more open space. So Jeff, well, your stats, are like Bart's is most of these, the vast majority are not major developments. These are people who have single family homes who just want to add a bathroom on or go out a couple of feet. I, for one, have voted against any variance that would create or enlarge a house to a McMansion. Not once. If you look back at my record, you'll see somebody comes in, their parents are old, they want a bathroom, great, give them a variance. Somebody wants to come in and build a 3,000 square foot place with a giant swimming pool and slides and all that. I'm not voting for that variance. I don't think this board does either. But thank you again for all coming out.
Katie, if I may real quickly, just to address Mr. Walsh's concern on that 70% rule in retirees, our current code provision has a segment that protects retirees who have otherwise qualified and worked here in Monroe County. I wrote that provision in 2017 when I was the assistant city attorney doing the land work here. I want to thank everybody for coming here. Mr. Siegel, I assure you that nothing that happens on this board happens in the dark. As the former assistant city attorney that represented this board, we take the Sunshine Law very seriously. While I've only been on this board for a couple of months, I've represented it for 5.5 years. We encourage all of you to please come to every meeting. We appreciate your input. We appreciate those of you who are civil, and we respect those of you who aren't. But your attendance here is very much appreciated, and we hope that you'll continue to participate. Thank you very much.
Any other planning board comments before we start to wrap up? You can let me know if there are. So one big comment there was from Commissioner Carey and others was to take a look at that April 7th meeting, and it was originally scheduled to be during the day, so we can talk to the city manager's office about looking at that. This is recorded. I think that was one of the ways we were hoping that we could make this meeting accessible, even if you couldn't attend in person. This is a town hall, so it's not on Legistar. It's different from a special called planning board meeting. That's another meeting format that has, there's trade-offs there, but we could also talk to the chair about, other ways to make this conversation more broadly available to people. I'd also note that every time we have a planning board meeting or city commission, you can attend, the public can attend, and we're talking to the planning board now about possibly putting agendas on our social media pages, so and also putting together a Zoom policy for planning boards. So if you support some of those possible changes, let us know. I heard from some city commissioners some potential code amendment ideas. We can follow up through the city manager's office on those. And then some programs that were suggested, possibly voluntary deed restriction program. I want to ask Bart, next steps. I know that the planning board asked that he consider breaking up the proposed code amendment into different pieces. I'm curious, in the next few months, just to clarify what dates you were thinking of bringing the remainder of the code amendments to planning board, and then also would you be agreeable to putting the whole thing together into one ordinance for city commission, or maybe that's a brief discussion we could have before we wrap up?
Well, as to the residential, I would really like to see that get approved, because the residential definitions, just so everyone understands, I worked with city staff on matching state and federal definitions for the different income limits. The reason for that is when you apply for state and federal funding, if you're not under the same definitions as the state and federal, it jeopardizes your ability to get funding. It just pretty much blew up one project that was out there, and it went out back to RFP, which was the school district project. And because they couldn't make the numbers work and couldn't get the correct appropriate funding, it's now back out for RFP. So it's very important that we get those definitions corrected for the residential, because I know I have 2 clients that are bidding on that RFP and are very much relying on that we meet state and federal definitions, because we need to. But the rest of it, I'm game for anything. The non-residential portion of it, I really think that the only disagreement that we have is on the redevelopment portion of it. And at a certain point, that just needs to be made by the policymaker. I'm glad to have another town hall meeting on the non-residential. I appreciate everyone showing up. But I know most of your focus is on the development incentives and the building permit side of it. The linkage, I stated at the last meeting, I believe our workforce comes all the way from Big Pine. I don't think we should be excluding them, but I leave it up to the policymakers to decide whether it's Stock Island or the Big Pine or west of the Shark Key Bridge. I think the more areas you give incentives to build it, the better, but I'll leave that to the policymakers, and I appreciate their decisions on that. So I'll leave it. I'm in no rush on the non-residential and the other components of it, so I'll leave it in your court to decide. I'm certainly open on April 10th to come back at night if that's where you want to change the meeting to. And I appreciate everyone's time.
I'm going to turn it over to the city manager to close up, and just wanted to thank everybody again for your time and for the planning board and elected officials who came. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so a huge thank you to everyone. I would tell you a few things. I continue to hear a few things that resonate with me. One of them is it feels like we're battling some opportunities regarding differences of opinion. What I really feel we're battling is just the divisiveness. If you leave today with anything, leave with the understanding of what we are trying to accomplish, which is we're not working in silos. It's not us versus them. When I hear the city or the planning board or it's applicant, it's if you're here, you're city. If you a tap water conch, you a freshwater conch, you a saltwater conch, you're living here, you're a conch. You're one human family. We are here. I view you as a city. You are the city. You share in the leadership, you share in the future of the city. Today is about showing you the example. We are not working in silos. We are working together. We're collaborating. We want input. We want it. We're inviting it. It is just in a way in which I take very seriously is how we treat each other. It's how we treat each other. Let's work on the problem and not the persons. So if you get anything from me and this leadership from our commission, our mayor, the individuals that are on the board, our team, our applicants, we are all working together to increase communication, to increase collaboration, and just to find a path forward. So know that it is with great sincerity that I say thank you. Thank you. Continue to come. I hear, well, we didn't know. and we wasn't advertised in the agenda, go to our website. Go to the city website. We have all the information there. We are trying to cascade every ability for you to attend, for every ability for you to have all the information that you need. We want that. If we need to do better, which it sounds like we will, you have our commitment as a team that we will be better, because we want everyone contributing. Okay, that's what I would tell you. A huge thank you for coming here today. This is the first of many, but I'd like you to believe that this is what is going to be moving forward with any and all opportunities regarding what faces the community here. You are the city. There is no us versus them. It is all us, and I appreciate that. And if you need better from me, please let me know. I'm committed to giving you better. Thank you.